Come on.
All right, everybody. Believe it or not, we're back. It's FranchisOR Bust time. I am your host, Trevor, as always. Who do we have in the middle of the screen? It's Katie.
It is Katie, and actually I'm on the left side of the screen for me, so we don't know what people are
Katie,
saying.
once again, being dyslexic, not understanding what side of the screen she's on. We're going to pass right on by that and talk about our guest today, who we are super excited to have on, Matt Robinson. You are about to enlighten us, and we're in for a treat to understand, I think, really a different side of kind of franchising, and a part that's important that we haven't talked much about, and that's the behavioral kind of psychology side. So we're going to get into some of that. But Matt, first of all, welcome, and give us a lowdown a little bit on yourself.
Geez, well, let's see. How can I summarize everything in 20 seconds? I have spent the majority of my career working with frontline teams, trying to help them perform better and make frontline work suck a little less, because those jobs are really important. There's 80 million hourly frontline workers in this country. Many of them work in franchise, and they are the entire customer experience for these brands. And so a lot can go wrong. And if we can make their jobs a little bit better and their lives a little better, then the companies that they work for perform a whole lot better. So I've been the head of customer experience for some Fortune 100 brands. I ran 1,100 stores for AT&T Wireless. I've got a lot of experience in the wireless industry, so I'm the guy you can blame for people texting and driving. I found my way into franchise about a decade ago and really fell in love with it because franchisees are the only people that I've ever met who paid to work there. And so they deserve to have access to tools and systems that help them run a successful business. And the franchise model is fascinating because the franchisor has a great product, great service, great brand, and they hand it to you as this business in a box. But the one part that's missing is the part that they're most dependent on, and that's the people part. And so for the last decade, as a multi-unit, multi-brand franchisee, I've really been obsessed with building systems to help franchisees execute the people side of the model. And that benefits franchisors too by helping the people follow the process. So that's kind of how I ended up as the founder and CEO of Upfront, with my business partners, also longtime franchisees.
I think I kind of think it's fascinating that you've zeroed in on that aspect, because for the most part, when we're speaking to people about franchising and being a franchisee, they immediately kind of veer in the direction of financials, or they look in the direction of, well, how important the product itself is, or whatever that may be. But I think it's cool and kind of interesting that you're saying, well, yeah, obviously all those things are important, but execution of the human element inside of those actual brick and mortars may be getting a little overlooked. Is that kind of the experience you've had, that side of the house has been maybe a little overlooked and maybe been a cause of some franchise models, or franchisees in particular, maybe not being as successful as they could be?
Yeah, that's absolutely overlooked. And if you look at the root cause of why franchisors and franchisees struggle, it generally is because they did not execute the model well. And that's generally because they did not do people well.
Got it. So speaking of that, then, we know that for franchisors, franchisees, the end game is, let's make a bunch of money and everybody be happy, right? I mean, you just mentioned they bought into something, and they bought it because they think this is going to be good for me, good for my life. I'm going to be successful, and move forward in that way. What are some of kind of maybe backing up from that thought to the fundamentals? What are some of the fundamentals besides the human element, maybe, that you've seen that sometimes can be a challenge for like a new franchisee or someone that is just getting into franchising, that maybe they don't understand, or maybe they may have a perception about in the franchise world that's not reality once they get in there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that marketing jumps to mind because a lot of franchisees assume that the minute that you hang out a shingle, that the doors are going to break open with tons of traffic, and that just does not materialize that way. Even with great site selection, even if you have great support from the franchisor, it does take work to build your customer base. So it's kind of a 1-2 thing. You've got to be able to drive traffic into your location and have the patience and the strategy to do that. But then you've got to field a team in that location that is capable of following the model well enough to deliver that brand promise and convert into ongoing customers.
It's interesting you bring up marketing. So I think that certainly relying just upon brand name and brand recognition is not a healthy strategy. You've got to actively pursue people in your area who may be interested in what it is that you do, what your franchise business brings to the table. Now, there are some exceptions. I mean, if you're McDonald's or a Subway or something like that, you're a little bit of a different ball game. But if you're in more of your traditional, just elective based franchise models, you've really got to get out into market. What are you really looking for with your marketing? Like what do you need to be prepared to kind of understand as you're going out and trying to market your local business to the anonymous masses that are in your area?
Well, I mean, I don't want this to sound like a shameless plug for LSM because I am a longtime LSM customer, but I believe strongly in finding a partner to help you because you can't possess expertise in all of these different domains. So if you're going to spend, $500,000 to buy a franchise location, build it out, get it staffed, have your operating costs covered, you've already spent a substantial amount of money, and you don't have the luxury of just guessing. And so, 25 years ago, when there was really just one option, maybe two. It was like direct mail and bus benches. Thankfully, we have, moved past that nonsense, and we've gotten to a place where there are experts that can really help supercharge that growth. And that's how I came to know you, and I learned, I believe, and I feel this strongly about it because of you and the experience that I had with LSM. What you guys did for our business, if you recall, we were with a large agency that was, multidisciplinary agency, didn't have domain expertise in any one thing. And it was fine, but we were guessing. And with a right partner, you don't have to guess. And your dollars can be very targeted at the solutions that have been proven to work in comparable businesses geographically. It's too big a risk to assume that you're just going to figure it out. For the same reason that you don't try to figure out the legal side, you have an attorney. For the same reason you don't try to figure out the financial side, you have an accountant. I don't know of any franchisee that's been able to just develop marketing domain expertise by virtue of just trying stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And most of the time they're using those bus benches just to sit on them, right? So I mean, that's worthless, over time.
Every single time we spent real money on a direct mail campaign, we felt like we had to take a shower afterwards. It's just
right.
It's terrible that's how we promoted our businesses back in the day. Some people still do it.
I know.
Unbelievable.
So I think we're going down a good path here. So we understand the value then of selecting a good part, really selecting someone that does this for a living, right? Just like you said, it's, you're not a plumber, so stop trying to go and fix, issues with your sink. Call somebody, then come over and do it. Same thing with your marketing. Now, once you do get a partner established, what should a franchisee and franchisor, obviously kind of both in this world, but what should they really be zeroing in on with the partner? Like what should they be kind of, focusing on, how many, clicks they get or whatever. I mean, but should they be focusing specifically on certain items, I guess is what I'm asking. And what in your experience are some of the most important ones?
Well, I mean, I think we could talk for a while on what they should do. In my experience, in my observations, there's what they actually do, and they do it virtually every time. And by they, I mean myself included as a franchisee. There are strong natural tendencies that we have when we pull a lever like engaging a marketing partner. We look at our daily KPI metrics dashboard report thing that we get on our iPad, and we want to see the KPIs go up. That's it. And if we don't see the KPIs go up, we demand to see reporting that shows clicks and graphs and charts and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of marketing agencies can show you graphs and charts, but the work that they're doing does not translate to your KPIs going up. So for better or for worse, franchisees are obsessed with KPIs, and we're just going to look at those KPIs, and we're going to assume that if we spend X here, that the end result is going to be KPIs increasing almost immediately.
Yeah. And, certainly in my experience, that is true. When the franchisee puts money out there, the expectation is more money's coming. And that is certainly the goal of the partner too. I mean, the goal of the agency or the partner you hire, that is their goal as well. But, if we dive deeper, sometimes we see that maybe there's some other issues at play. And I'm sure you've built a business, specifically around making sure that those frontline workers have the tools they need to succeed. But maybe talk a little bit then about the process. Like, let's say the agency comes to you and says, "Hey, listen, we've given you 70 leads, in the last 30 days, and from what you told me, the closing percentage is 35%, but really what you're saying is you've only closed 3 people. So what is going on?" And I'm sure you've experienced that. And what are some of your thoughts with just that in general, and then maybe some remedies for that as well?
Yeah, I mean, what really happens ultimately when you look at campaigns that drive traffic, but they aren't seeing results as far as KPIs going up, that is an execution problem. It is poor conversion at the site level caused by poor execution at the employee level. And if you look at the data, there's been a lot of research done on this by Gallup and by some of the big consulting firms. And it's borne out time and time again that roughly 3/4 of the time when a new customer does not buy on their first experience, it's because of poor service. So in franchise, that means the people didn't follow the process, because there's always a process. That's one of the things I love about franchise is how to do it right is relatively clear. So if you get bad outcomes, you can blame whoever you want, but ultimately it's because your people did not follow the process. And there's a whole host of root causes of that, which we can get into if you want, but that's really the fundamental of where it starts.
Okay. So yeah, I certainly agree with that, but how do we then take the next step into solving? So if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, "Okay, yeah, my people suck. I agree, Matt. What do I do? What do I do?"
It's funny. It's not even that the people suck. In fact, in most cases, the people don't suck. But that is a conclusion that franchisees will often jump right to, because the assumption is made, hey, we hired this person, we gave them 45 minutes of training, and they should be able to master the process. How are they not following the process? You've heard that question probably raised thousands of times. The primary reasons why frontline employees don't execute well, there's really just a couple of them. The first is a lack of clarity around expectations. They might know that their job is to hit a number, but they don't know the exact steps on how to. They may have been trained, but they certainly haven't been able to achieve mastery over that. So they don't really fundamentally know the process. And the example that I give is a sports team. So if you think about the way sports teams work, if you're an NFL, I know you're an NFL fan, right? So a wide receiver goes to training camp and they run the plays in the playbook thousands of times, over and over and over again, so that it becomes muscle memory. They're given that opportunity to do that. And they're paid lots of money to develop that mastery so that when it comes game time, they're not thinking about it. They just execute the play. So we have the same expectation of perfection from an hourly frontline employee who makes $13 an hour, who's 19 years old, who's relatively disinterested, probably hungover, and yet we expect them to run that play perfectly. So that's the first thing that we see every time, is that the frontline staff have not developed mastery around the expectations. They're not clear. And then the second and even bigger one is those 19-year-old kids we're talking about are managed by a 24-year-old who got keys and codes, but absolutely no training around managing people and human behavior change management. Those are complicated things that take years to learn. So you've got these enthusiastic young managers that are basically practicing live on real employees. And so when you have a lack of clarity reinforced by under-equipped managers, what that's going to do is lead to disengagement, and that's going to lead to high turnover, which means that every bit of accumulated knowledge that you have in that store keeps walking out the door. And that ultimately leads to poor brand reputation, which hurts future marketing endeavors. So it's this vicious cycle that keeps happening. And it all goes back to that lack of clarity and under-equipped managers.
I think that you're in a clear way, which is awesome, kind of outlining why would a proven business model, which most franchises are, fail. In other words, why would the franchisee spend all this money, engage? And most of the time, these franchisees have been successful at something else. So they're generally coming in, not business novices per se, but maybe a novice to the brand they're getting into. And you look back, why, how could they not be successful at that? And I think you're hit the nail on two fronts there, which is, not really understanding how to promote the business, and then blaming the lack of results maybe on the promotion versus the execution at the employee level.
That's exactly right.
See how good I am at retention and picking up on, what's being said.
Wow.
You're a savant. Definitely.
No wonder I run the #1 franchise-based podcast in Brentwood, Tennessee. I mean, it's incredible. I am #1 just in this 10-mile radius, but it's amazing.
People were saying it was #2, but I'll take your word for it.
Franchise or Disaster, the other one down the street. They've tried. They ripped off the whole concept.
They're imposters. We know.
Anyways, so there's been discussion about the poor execution and the employees and all that good stuff. So outside of just training and kind of, repetition and muscle memory and those things like that, what other type of initiatives can franchisees who, let's say they've got the passion, they want to succeed, they're just maybe, not seeing the results because of those issues we've been identifying, what other things can they engage in to really help their frontline workers and their staff?
Right. So I think it's important to answer your question that we start with what franchisees do today. What are the most common levers that they pull now so that franchisees can see these actions clearly? So the first thing that we see happen almost reflexively when you have poor execution at the front line is they will initiate unnecessary retraining. The assumption is made wrongly that an employee who has been there for 5 months needs retraining because they're not executing well. When in reality, the underlying issue could be something very different. When a wide receiver doesn't run the pass route correctly in the middle of the season, they don't go back to training camp, right? So that's the first thing, unnecessary retraining. The second thing that franchisees will often do, and I have done this myself and learned this lesson, it's expensive, is some sort of an incentive or contest, which is like a sugar high.
Mhm.
So you get this momentary bump, but you don't activate the commitment to the process that outlasts that contest. So you get short-term gains, and then you end up right back where you started. And then you have this tendency to, after those couple of things, you'll hear about franchisees undertaking these culture initiatives. And culture is kind of a frustrating word in our world, because lots of companies spend thousands of hours and tens of thousands of dollars on culture initiatives. But culture is such an abstract, vague concept. And we believe that at the end of the day, culture is what your people do when no one is looking. Culture is an outcome, not an initiative that you can activate. So after they've tried this stuff that's kind of on the feel-good side, generally the escalation path is increased pressure. They put more pressure. They start writing people up. They start issuing, demands. They have more staff meetings, and they're repeating themselves all the time. And next thing you know, it turns into a replacement situation. Whether it's voluntary or involuntary, you are now again sending your accumulated knowledge out the door and starting over. Saying that think about how many hundreds of hours get invested in an employee, or especially a manager. Letting that person go means I'm going to have to do that all over again for the same number of hundreds of hours just to get back to the same place. So that's why the desire should be extremely high to figure out how to make that person work because of the investment that you've already made, especially in a tight labor market. How many franchisees do you hear right now saying, well, I just, my business is really doing terribly because there's just not enough people out there? Mm-hmm. Well, everybody has seemingly gotten accustomed to 150% annualized turnover. That means you're replacing your entire team every single 9 months. How is that sustainable?
Yeah. Crazy. That's certainly a recurring theme right now for sure. And that's one of the reasons why what you do and what you're narrowing in on here is so valuable to, franchisees and franchisors alike, to really narrow in on that and focus on it, because the end goal of success has a lot of cumulative factors. And this is certainly one that is vitally important for making sure that these succeed. So we talked about, kind of the action items they can take today, all the things that lead up, to that and why it's so important. Maybe leave us with a few just final thoughts about, and it could be revolved around, the frontline workers and things like that, or I love that you brought up that culture is a little bit abstract. Culture is something that's talked about a ton, right? It's constant. It's always, well, our culture, our culture, our culture. And you're kind of backing in to say, well, everybody probably has good culture when you're standing in front of them, and I think that's a really powerful statement. But maybe leave us with just some general final thoughts about, success and execution, like you've mentioned, and kind of put a bow on what we've been talking about.
Absolutely. So let me answer your last question, because you asked, what can franchisees do to really solve the root cause of this inconsistent or poor execution at the customer level? And the first thing that they can do to stop that hire, train, repeat cycle is solve the right problem. And I'll leave you with another repeatedly validated statistic. 70% of what employees do at work is caused by one thing, and that's the interactions they have with their manager. 70%. So everything else we do, culture initiatives, training, compensation, benefits, bonuses, everything else, 30%. Not to diminish their importance, 30%. So if I'm going to try to fix execution, I'm going to try to solve for the biggest thing first if I'm a franchisee. So if manager interactions determine 70% of what employees do at work, then what I'm going to do is figure out how to improve those interactions. And that's really what our company is built to do. What we do is come in and we achieve manager readiness. We close the manager readiness gap in two key areas. We help them achieve behavioral clarity, exactly what's expected at the employee level. And we help managers master coaching and feedback skills so those interactions go well. So they know exactly what to say in just a couple of minutes to have an underperforming employee actually get on process. And as soon as an employee gets on process and starts getting a few small wins, it starts to build momentum. It's no different than athletics. Employees who start to feel momentum start to gain confidence. And next thing you know, the process we've been talking about becomes a habit. And as soon as that happens, you get fantastic outcomes in the business. People stay exponentially longer, they perform better, and they don't disengage and check out. Franchisees get to stop repeating themselves in every single manager meeting they have. And franchisors stop stressing out about these franchisees that are clearly non-compliant because they don't do people well. The whole cycle gets turned into a virtuous one as soon as you solve the right problem, which is getting those manager-employee interactions right.
Kaboom. I love it.
Did that land it for you?
I think that is fantastic. I think we've learned a great bit today. I've learned a lot today, and I really appreciate that. I'm not a franchisee, but just as it pertains to my own business, just as a business owner, and focusing on the execution of the people and the managers, I think that is all spot on. I loved it. I'm sure the tens of thousands listening to this podcast are going to love it as well. And we really do appreciate your expertise. Here's to you, Mr. Robinson. I really appreciate you being on with us. And we have one last tradition to do. Katie's going to spin the wheel to tell us whether or not Matt Robinson's going to franchise or if he's going to bust. Oh, unbelievable. Shoot. Look at that thing. It's almost like it's biased. Do you see that wheel?
Well,
what did it say?
She did it. Hold it up there. It said you're going to, now it switched to friend. Okay. Now success.
Yeah.
Huh. That's an interesting wheel there you have.
Yeah. A 1 out of 15 chance, and boom, he nails it first try. He's franchising. Success is a guarantee now after this moving forward. Matt, we really, really appreciate you. Thank you. It's been super amazing to hear what you had to say. And I would say the most prepared FranchisOR Bust guest and one of the most interesting, because we got to talk not about legal and FDDs, but we talked about what really matters, in my opinion, and that is who's executing the work and why they're so important.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Katie, thank you for building a great company and leading a great team over there at LSM. I applaud you for being able to tolerate Trevor. I know you keep him on staff to meet a quota, but listen, you're doing great work. Keep it up.
Thank you so much. It's my 10th year, and we've made it.
Can you believe that? Can you believe anyone's been with me for 10 years?
It's our longest relationship in life.
It is our longest relationship, and we've never been so proud.
Well, congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Matt, and everyone who listened. Catch you on the next FranchisOR Bust. We out.
Come on.